You're listening to the Renegade Blitz Podcast, a podcast for Steelers fans by Steelers fans. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on renegadeblitz.com, and like us on Facebook. And welcome back to the Renegade Blitz Podcast. I'm Ty Polk, joined by Chris Ward. It's time for another preview episode, Steelers versus Ravens Round 2, Thanksgiving edition. And Chris, as we woke up today, we found out that the Ravens are dealing with a COVID scare.
Yeah, their two running backs, J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram, tested positive for COVID-19 and will be out for Thursday night's game. And also Brandon Williams, their nose tackle, was a close contact, so he has to self-isolate for the next 5 days, and he'll also be out for Baltimore.
It's a shame. You were hoping to see both teams at full strength, but the league is running according to COVID, and it's sadly struck at the wrong time for these Ravens that are looking to bounce back after a two-game losing streak. Chris, COVID's also affected the odds for Steelers versus Ravens as well.
Yeah, according to oddschart.com, the Steelers are 4.5-point favorites, and over-under for points is 45. And I think, before this whole COVID situation, the spread was around like 3, so it seemed to go up, by a point or so.
The old saying is, scared money don't make no money. I wonder what the saying is for sick money. So hopefully Steelers fans and maybe anyone else are able to take advantage of this, and may the odds forever be in your favor. And now it's time to talk more about these Baltimore Ravens, and let's find out what's been happening since the Steelers have last faced them with our next guest. And we're glad to have on Adrian Charchalis, writer for Baltimore Beatdown of SB Nation. Adrian, glad to have you on the show.
Hey guys, hey Tyler, hey Chris, thanks for having me. Really excited to get things going here.
Well, it's been a long 3 or so weeks since the Steelers have last faced the Ravens. They've gone 1-2, a little bit of a mini tailspin. They lost to the Patriots and the Titans by 6 points each. What were the reasons for those losses, and what concerned you the most about them?
So I think a big reason for the first loss against New England is I don't think the Ravens are ready for the physicality that the Patriots are going to bring to them. It was a wet Sunday night football game, rainy. Cam Newton's not going to be throwing the ball that much just because in that particular weather, he's just not going to do it. And I feel like he doesn't even throw that much when the weather's fine out. So that gives him even more inclination to run the ball. And I must say, their offensive line totally beat the Ravens to the attack. And I think the running game really hurt the Ravens. And that showed in the score. In terms of the Titans game, it's funny because these games are a little bit different in certain ways. But the Titans game, the Ravens seemed to be in control for the majority of the game, which was really impressive. I was really thrilled to see that since the offense has been pretty inconsistent over the course of the season. Closing games, they just having trouble closing games. And that was evident in the Titans game. They're up 21-10, had a nice 2-possession cushion. And they couldn't get a few first downs and to extend the game, give themselves a chance for more points. It just didn't happen like that. So there's different reasons for these losses, but it's tough to see it.
And Adrian, what's been the reaction around Ravens fans about the last few weeks? They're still very much in contention for a playoff spot with an additional team being added to the fold, but it's not been the performance that was expected in Baltimore and around the league, especially coming off a 14-2 regular season last year.
Yeah, I think coming off of that 14-2 record, expectations are through the roof in Baltimore. I think it was obvious. I mean, even nationwide, early Super Bowl favorites for this year. And I think fans are really sort of counting on that. And that's sort of what they see with this team because the team itself, Coach Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson, stress making it to the Super Bowl, making it to the big game. I'm going to do it. When the season kind of goes like this, the way it's going, fans, they get a little impatient and they don't like what they're seeing. So as a result of that, the morale's not really high right now. I go on Twitter sometimes, see what everyone's saying. People are coming to terms with the reality that the Ravens may not be the team that they are last year. I think that's pretty obvious, but after these couple games, the picture's clearing a little bit.
What do you think the main problem has been for the Ravens in their loss against the Steelers? You mentioned physicality with New England and then just not being able to finish the game. last night against the Titans. Is it a combination?
That's a good question. I mean, in terms of the Steelers game, that was sort of another situation. The Ravens had a lead. I think they were ahead until the fourth quarter, if I remember. But it's just things like that. They're just having trouble. The thing that comes with a elite quarterback, if you want to throw Lamar Jackson in top 5, I don't know, but some people have him in that sort of range. I put Roethlisberger in the top 5 because he has the ability to get those extra first downs, convert the easy passes, get those 3rd and 3s, extend drives, that I think Lamar Jackson's having sort of trouble understanding that the defenses, they're giving him a lot because they don't trust his arm, which makes sense, but he just has to take what he's given and try to extend these drives and close out these games. So ultimately it's coming down to just a little more from the offense, I think, to really close out these games.
Well, what are these things that they're giving him? Is it the underneath passes that are kind of like a staple of the Steelers offense right now? It's been quick passing with that. I've seen a ton of Ravens games with that, and especially last year, it felt like Jackson kind of excelled. It's like you knew he could run, and that was where the RPO action went through, and really any option attack for the Ravens last year was successful. Has that been one of the issues, that just not capitalizing on these RPOs, quick throws, these underneaths?
I definitely think so. I mean, it was evident last week. Des Bryant, who I think out of anyone in the offense, I think he had the best game. He played very well. I was very impressed with how he played. There were a number of times when the corner was playing bail. She was playing off coverage and sort of trying to mirror Dez's route a little bit and give him some cushion. And Dez was open on a number of underneath throws. Maybe it wouldn't have been a first down, but it would have been easy 4 or 5 yards, give him a chance to make a guy miss, maybe get a first down. It's those types of things that Jackson needs to realize, because the run game isn't particularly great. And I'm really hoping that Gus Edwards shoulders a load this Thursday, because Dobbins and Ingram will be out because of COVID. But with the running game not being as good as it was last year, Lamar Jackson has to take what the defenses give him. And sometimes those underneath throws, like you mentioned.
And how about throwing to like the outside? Because I've heard some people, Ravens fans or, people in the media, talk about how he struggles throwing to the outside, because it's kind of mostly in the middle sometimes with, off play action into his tight ends, or, maybe some of those underneath routes.
Yeah, I definitely think that he thrives in the middle of the field. It's pretty odd. That's why Willie Snead's one of his favorite guys, because he's always open in the middle, and that's sort of the easiest throw for him. And he really utilizes that very well. That's one of his biggest strengths. But throwing beyond the hashes has, with the exception of throwing to his tight ends, throwing to receivers, I haven't seen it that much this year. I don't know if it's with him. I don't know if he doesn't think that he can make the throw, so he just takes what he's given underneath or uses his legs. But I think if that's one of the big things that separates him from other throwing quarterbacks, which is the ability to make those throws. And he's had trouble.
One thing that's been brought up a lot with the Ravens, media and fans, is the loss of offensive guard Marshall Yanda to retirement, and how that has affected the Ravens' rushing attack and pass protection. Also, Ronnie Stanley was lost for the season against the Steelers in their first matchup. What was changed with the Ravens, once, they had a great offensive line for years, and, it seems like they're not up to par this season so far.
I think the loss of Marshall Yanda has definitely been understated. It's not my opinion, but he's shown that he's one of the best offensive guards to play the game in our generation. So losing a guy like that, losing a locker room presence like that, a key veteran, an all-pro, that's tough. That's tough. And I must say, Tyree Phillips at the beginning of the season really filled in. He was doing his best, and he was doing a really good job, but he's dealt with some injuries, so Ravens probably won't see him until later in the season. The Ronnie Stanley loss was just devastating. That was just a freak thing. He signed his extension, I believe, the Friday before that game, and he broke his ankle and was out for the season. So that was a really tough loss. Orlando Brown has done a very solid job fitting in there. He played left tackle in college, so I don't think it was too tough of a transition. but the rest of the line has been a little shaky, and it's been a little concerning. They ran the ball pretty well last week against Tennessee, but at times it was Jackson having a tough time, finding time to throw the ball.
Did they switch centers?
Yes. It was Matt Skura who started in the rain against New England. He had trouble snapping the ball. He had multiple bad snaps. And then Pat McCarry played in his place for the Tennessee game.
They benched him for that performance against the Patriots?
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
Well, let's move on to the receivers, and we'll get to Dez in a little bit. But it's interesting because Hollywood Brown said on Twitter, I'm basically going to paraphrase it, I don't have the tweet in front of me.
Sure.
That he wanted to be more involved in the offense. It was after the first game of this rivalry this season. What did you think about that statement, and has his role improved in the past couple weeks, and what do you expect for Thursday?
I mean, based on the statement, I was kind of excited about it. I'm like, all right, kid, like if you want to throw shade at the coaching staff a little bit, throw shade at Greg Roman for not giving you design plays, cool. Maybe they'll involve you more. But at the same time, you got to back up your play. You have to show that based on what you said on Twitter, based on what you said to everybody, they're going to back it up and make some big plays. And he's failed to really do that so far. He's been playing all the snaps. He's been on the field, but I think he gets timid in the middle of the field sometimes, catching the ball. He had a big drop last week, right in the middle of the field. I think he's afraid of getting hit. I mean, I haven't played football in the longest time, but the kid, he's small. He's small. So I feel like that sort of thing maybe gets in his head. I'm not sure. But he's been dropping balls all over the field a little bit. But he has to definitely improve that because the team needs him. He's their number one guy, supposedly, so he has to show that.
That's insane, considering that the pedigree he has with Antonio, and we know that Antonio didn't care. He was going to catch it anywhere, which is shocking. And you mentioned a little bit earlier with Dez Bryant, his first NFL action in 2 years. What is his role in this offense right now, and has he played himself into a bigger role?
I definitely think that he's played himself into a bigger role. He showed last week that he belongs, that he's still good. He can still play at a high level. He looks also, I forgot how big he was. He's a really big receiver, and I think he should get more opportunities. And because he's the guy that thrived on jump ball catches for most of his career. So I think that alone should give the Ravens more inclination to, look to him and throw him the ball. I mean, he has backed up his play. I must say, I was very impressed.
And one thing has given the Steelers trouble, their last two meetings against the Ravens, they've rushed for over 200 yards, dating back to last year. In Week 8, the Ravens rushed for 265 yards on the ground, the most the Steelers defense gave up since December 26th of 1993 against the Seattle Seahawks. Well, what were the Ravens doing that created this, rare performance by the Steelers, and how confident are you in the fact that they could do it again?
So which game was that again in last season?
The last game of the year. They rushed for over 200. Gotcha.
So I remember that game. Lamar Jackson did not play because they went to rest him for the playoffs, which made sense. It's what you do with your starting quarterbacks when you're in a situation like that. And Robert Griffin III started. RG3 started. So, I mean, with that game, it was just a matter of what the Ravens were setting themselves out to do from the very beginning. I think they knew that they don't have as much of a dual threat ability with RG3, even though he's still very mobile. He's not up to the level of Lamar Jackson. So I think something like that you have to consider is that they're going to run the ball just to, avoid having RG3 throwing the ball 25, 30 times a game. Because ideally they'd rather keep it on the ground, which makes sense.
The one in Week 8, the Ravens rushed for 265 yards.
Yeah, I mean, that was another week. That was J.K. Dobbins' breakout week. His play really elevated the team. I don't think it was a matter of whether the offensive line played fantastic, but I think Dobbins really thrived in that particular game and really found his pockets and took advantage of it. And then Gus Edwards was just doing Gus Edwards, where he just runs north-south. Very powerful runner. And I think the combination of those guys really allowed for both of them to flourish. And, of course, Jackson being incorporated too.
You mentioned the COVID casualties for the running backs. Who are they again?
J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram will not be playing on Thursday.
That was one of my questions, really. Like, Mark Ingram was kind of out of the offense, and it's just like he's basically the one that invented, Truz, the entire big thing for the Ravens. And how are they going to bring him back into the offense? Because it seemed like I noticed a trend since the Ravens game that teams weren't necessarily thriving with like one or two rushers. Like, even Denver had the best game at that point, and not even Derrick Henry, who just caused fits for you guys, was doing well. Well, now that it's only Edwards, it's who else is going to be running the ball in addition to Jackson? Because these multiple rushers over the past couple of weeks for the Steelers have really managed to make some headway against this strong run defense.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's going to be a lot of Jackson involved. It's kind of been the trend for the past few weeks. He's been using his legs a lot. In addition to Edwards, Justice Hill will finally get a good look. I remember him in college. I really liked his tape from Oklahoma State, speedster, kind of scat back sort of guy. He's going to get more of a look. He'll get more snaps. So it'll be interesting to see how he does. I haven't seen that much of him as a Raven just because he's been overshadowed by three other guys. Going north-south against a defensive line like Pittsburgh, that could be tough for him. But at the same time, they should really use his speed. And then there's a third guy who they might bring up from the practice squad, Tyshawn Johnson. They could bring him up, and he could have an impact, which could be really interesting.
Yannick Ngakoue, he made his Ravens debut against the Steelers, reuniting with my favorite Calais Campbell from his time in Jacksonville. How has he looked since the trade?
He played very well last week. He played well against Tennessee. He put some pressure on Ryan Tannehill. That was evident. He nearly strip sacked him once. So it was good to see that. I think he was sort of getting used to his role initially because from what I remember, I think he was sort of a situational kind of pass rusher that thrived on like the third downs. And that's when he would really sort of make his impact. And I think he's been playing more of a 3-down linebacker sort of position, defensive end kind of hybrid. So he's been on the field a little more, sort of being relied upon to put the pressure on the quarterback. And he's done good so far. I mean, I can't really complain. Him and Judon as a tandem have been very solid so far. And that's one thing that I'm glad to see.
And you also have Derek Wolfe back there. It's like the Ravens, we've kind of seen teams that kind of like, especially in that 4-3 front, they really this season sell out on defensive linemen, and basically the linebackers are kind of guys who are young and unproven or more pass coverage guys. It's interesting to see the differences, like where teams actually decide, okay, we're going to put it on defensive line and linebacker, and that's going to kind of segue into Patrick Queen, who's another one of those great Ravens linebackers. Just talk about how the linebacking core for the Ravens has done so far this year.
I think the linebacking core has really started out very well. Patrick Queen had a very great start to the season. I think he won Defensive Rookie of the Week early on in the season. So he's been as advertised. He struggled the past couple games, I must admit. He's taken a couple bad angles on some tackles that led to some big runs by running backs. So he's going through the growing pains of a rookie. I mean, I can't dislike the way he's playing just because I know what talent he has, and he's very good. And, like I was saying, he's going through the ebbs and flows of a rookie season. That makes sense. That happens. You can't play veteran middle linebacker. You can't do it every game because he's a rookie. He's getting his feet wet, which makes sense. Malik Harrison has really showed up. He's been playing well on limited snaps, weak side kind of guy. So he's been very good in that position, splitting with LJ Fort, who's also very good. It's a young crew, linebacking core. So three of them kind of go through sometimes tougher games, which is fine. But, going down this late game stretch, they're going to really have to step up for the team because they're the top guys in that room.
And Brandon Williams has been ruled out also for being a close contact with the contract tracing. And do you think Calais Campbell will play this week? I know he was out last week. And how big of a loss is it without them when they were in the lineup against Tennessee?
I think it was definitely, to answer your last question, definitely a big difference with them being absent. I think although the Ravens definitely did a very good job in limiting Derrick Henry in the first half, I was very impressed. He didn't really do much damage to begin with. But at the same time, like having those guys in the lineup would have definitely helped. Brandon Williams has proven to be one of the best run stuffing nose guards in the league. So that's definitely a tough loss that the Ravens encountered. But at the same time, their def played very, very solid. It just came towards the end of the game when Derrick Henry, that's when he thrives at his best. And, it doesn't always work out that way.
And do you think Campbell, will he be good to go on Thursday night?
I'm not sure. It's not looking great. I don't think he practiced this week. So I wouldn't count on it. I think it would make more sense to sort of let him take this game off, let him heal for that extra time that the Ravens have, and, play him on that following Sunday. I think that makes the most sense for what they're doing right now.
What players have been filling in for them?
So right now it's been Broderick Washington, who is a rookie from Texas Tech, as well as Justin Matabuke, who went to Texas A&M. And they're rookies. They're young guys. They're draft picks this year. So them stepping into that immediate role, they did relatively well in it. And I think it's good to get that early exposure because it's only a matter of time before they're going to be relied upon to put together those weekly efforts and play well on a weekly basis and get a lot of snaps. So they've been solid early on.
What about the Ravens secondary? I didn't exactly hear some good things about like Marlon Humphreys in this last game, and of course they still have Marcus Peters out there, and the revolving door changed after deciding to release Earl Thomas. I mean, just how has the secondary's performance been since the Steelers game?
I think this game against the Titans really picked on Marcus Peters, and they made an effort to pick on him because they knew they have big receivers. They have guys like Jonnu Smith, who's a tight end receiver, kind of hybrid. He plays a little bit of both sometimes. A.J. Brown, who's a very, very big receiver, very powerful. And Corey Davis, who's no slouch, who really does well in that number 2 role in that offense. They picked on Marcus Peters, and they forced him to tackle. They dared him to tackle, and Peters really kind of refused to. He was trying to push guys out of bounds instead of wrapping up and sort of letting other guys finish the job for him. So, yeah, I wasn't particularly impressed with him. Marlon Humphrey, I mean, I can't hate the guy. He's a Class A talent. He's one of the best. So it's tough for me to really criticize him. But, I mean, losing guys like Anthony Averett and Tavon Young, just good key depth pieces, it's definitely hurt them. In terms of the safeties, I think Earl Thomas, yes, he might be a culture ruiner, quote unquote, I guess. But I must say, Deshaun Elliott has filled in very well. He's a really hard-hitting safety. He put a lick on Derrick Henry last week. I was very impressed with that. So I think, I mean, I can't complain with the safeties that much, but overall solid, but there's always room for improvement.
I remember from the last game, I was impressed with the safety play. I thought Chuck Clark and Deshaun Elliott, played pretty well. But that's surprising to hear about Marcus Peters because hasn't he always been known to be a physical player? I know Humphrey is, he's a great at punching the ball out.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Peters is one of the best press corners in the league. He's sort of his MO from the start as he got into the league. But once push comes to shove, if Marcus Peters is going to make a business decision when he has a big 6'4" AJ Brown coming towards him, he's not going to choose to tackle him. It's just not what he really does. He never really liked tackling. It's kind of obvious, but that's something that if you got to step up if you want to beat these teams like that.
Yeah. So do you think Humphrey will match up with Juju Smith-Schuster? Because I know that he's always the past 2 games or 3, he's matched up with Juju a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a really distinct possibility. I think it happened last game. I think I'd say Juju won the battle on that one, battle among wars. I do think Marlon Humphrey will shadow him again. I think it makes sense that he would shadow him again and let Jimmy Smith and Marcus Peters deal with the likes of Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson. But yeah, I think that'll be the steady matchup moving forward for Humphrey in this game.
Well, what's your biggest concern for this game, and who do you think can have a big performance for the Ravens?
I think Gus Edwards is due for a big game. I know that he's not the sexiest running back. He's not the shiftiest, not the quickest, but he's the type of guy that really needs to make an impact and try to wear the Steelers defense down a little bit to give Lamar Jackson some relief in the passing game. At the same time, I think a guy like Des Bryant could have a very good game. He could be, he sort of loves to thrive in these big game situations. And I think it makes sense to feed him the ball, give him a chance, allow him to make a move or two, get in someone's face or something. I mean, there needs to be more intensity, and I think in terms of the overall team right now. And I think guys like that can deliver it. Is that your biggest concern, the intensity right now for the Ravens? Well, I know I was on Twitter after the game, and I was reading some of what some I guess reporters were saying about the post-game press conferences, and I heard a lot of Lamar Jackson said that it seemed like the Titans this isn't a direct quote, but it seemed like the Titans wanted it more than us. When you hear that from your franchise guys, some of these other guys said sort of the same thing. That's a little bit concerning. I find that concerning as a fan. I find that concerning as a Ravens fan because the Ravens seem to really pride themselves on their physicality as a franchise. Well, first, before we get to your predictions, we want to get this first prediction out of the way because it's the elephant in the room, really. Is this game going to be played on Thursday? I think so. Yeah, signs are looking towards the game being played, which I was very happy about. It'll be a pretty boring Thanksgiving if I didn't have the privilege of watching a divisional game like this. But yeah, I think everyone's going to play as long as there are no close contacts, no high risk or anything like that. So yeah, I'm optimistic.
And our final question for you, Adrian, is: do you have a prediction for the game?
Interesting. I didn't actually come up with a prediction, but I can give you guys one. By the way, you can cut this out. For my sake, I'm just going to take the Ravens. I hope that's okay with you guys. I don't want to
Now leave that in there, buddy. Come on. You gotta this is Steelers versus Ravens. I don't care. I was coming out there with Duck Hodges, and I was getting made fun of on a cruise ship this time last year by every Raven fan that was coming from Maryland. You better ride with your team because I rode with mine.
I'm riding with my team. I'm riding with my team.
What's the score?
Right. Back in character. All right. In terms of my prediction for the game, I'm going to take Ravens in a relatively high-scoring game. It'll be similar to the sort of last encounter. I'm saying 27-23. Ravens take it. I think Lamar Jackson really does a good job in closing out the game. I'm really hoping that he gets over that, that sort of lump that he's been dealing with the past couple weeks. Win the game for the team. I think he's going to do it.
They do still have a chance to make the playoffs, obviously, if they lose this game. But, I mean, they'll be in the mix with a bunch of teams. Who do they have, towards the end of the season as far as their to close the season?
And it's not showing up. Hold on.
But, if they win their final 5 games, say they lose this game, they still could sneak into the playoffs.
Definitely. I think if after the Pittsburgh game, they have Dallas, they have Cleveland on Monday night. They have the Jaguars, the Giants, and then the Bengals. So I think the Ravens definitely have an opportunity, with Cleveland being their biggest threat, to sort of go on a 5-game season-ending win streak, which would be great because that would put them at 11-5 should they lose on Thursday. And that's probably good enough for a playoff spot.
Not all is lost if they do end up losing. So do Ravens fans consider this as a must-win game, or they just need a win to get back going?
I just think for team morale, it will be a great win. It will be a great beating the Pittsburgh Steelers. Putting a loss on their record, putting something in the L column. I think that'll be a big boost for the Ravens. That's something that they definitely need, and I really hope they bring the intensity on Thursday because I definitely know that Pittsburgh will, and they have to match it. So I just got to ask, Steelers-Ravens, Thanksgiving night, this should be like an every year thing. Or at least Christmas night, like a couple years ago. I think so, too. I mean, those are the games that really separate the mean and the meaner. It's always fun watching them. As a kid, it's always something you look forward to. And I feel like it should be on one of those holidays on a yearly basis, on an annual basis. I mean, it makes sense. It's great entertainment for family functions that may not be the best. So you can just watch the Ravens-Steelers game. It's a great little opportunity.
Yeah, no more NFC East and whatever the hell that is, and the Detroit Lions. We need winning football.
We need football teams.
Yeah.
And Adrian, do you have a favorite Steelers Ravens memory?
I think my favorite Ravens-Steelers memory is Wild Card. I forget what year, maybe 2013, and the Ravens. I think it was 2013 actually. The Ravens won 33-14 very handily. Joe Flacco led. And I think that was one of my proudest moments as a fan, because when you see a win like that, when Ben Roethlisberger is playing, because not often do the Ravens beat the Steelers when Roethlisberger's on the field. When you beat a Ben Roethlisberger toe-to-toe like that, that's nothing better, I must say.
Yeah, because those AFC Championship games have been a little rough for you guys. I think that was like the last time. I think it was the last time the Steelers got beaten at home on the playoffs, aside from Jacksonville. Yeah, that was the last. Other than that, so it was good for you guys to finally get one back after 2 straight trips to the Super Bowl at Baltimore's expense. I truly love that. It warmed my heart, made it like 5 times bigger.
Like we mentioned before the show, I mean, these Steelers-Ravens games are just always close and, just always entertaining to watch.
That's Adrian Charchalis, writer for Baltimore Beatdown of SB Nation. Adrian, it was fun to talk to you, and I can't wait for this Thanksgiving game.
Tyler, Chris, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. I hope you eat well, have a good family function, and enjoy some football. That's what Thanksgiving is all about.
And that was Adrian Charchalis, writer for Baltimore Beatdown of SB Nation. And Chris, I forgot to get your favorite part of the Steelers-Ravens rivalry.
Yeah, probably the games you mentioned, the 2 playoff wins. The first one coming in the AFC Championship game, and the second one, the divisional round in 2010. The 2008 AFC Championship game was when Troy Polamalu had the pick 6 to send the Steelers to Super Bowl 43. So that's always been a special memory. And the Steelers Ravens, they have so many close games, and there's so many that stick out, but that one probably sticks out the most.
You were correct with your prediction for the Steelers in terms of points. You predicted 27-20, and the Steelers got 27, but Jacksonville could only muster 3. And meanwhile, I swung and missed hard, but I'm okay with it because, it's still a Steelers win, even though, as Dejan Kovacevic said on there, it was like towards the second half, you were like, okay, let's wrap this up, huh?
Yeah, it wasn't an entertaining game, really. I mean, it felt like a preseason game there towards the end where you just wanted to end and, move on to Baltimore on Thursday night. But, yeah, you had the Steelers winning 27-17. So I got the point total right, but obviously the Jaguars only scored 3 points. And, yeah, their quarterback there, Jake Luton, didn't give much. He was a third career start for him, and he didn't look really good. And Jacksonville just didn't have much overall.
Well, now, what's your prediction for Steelers versus Ravens on Thanksgiving night?
So I'm going to go with a 3-point Steelers win. Yeah, I mean, Steelers-Ravens games are always tough, and they go down to the wire. The last game that they played, Minka Fitzpatrick had a pass deflection in the end zone on the final play to clinch the win for the Steelers. I have the Steelers winning 26-23. I think it's going to come down to a last-second Boswell field goal.
Yeah, that seems pretty close to the docket for tomorrow's game. I'm going to say that it's going to be a little bit more closer here. I'm actually going to say 19-17 Steelers.
2-point win for the Steelers. Yeah, I think they're going to, the Steelers have scored over 24. They scored 24 points or more all season. So they kind of been in that range. So I'm going to say 26 points, but yeah, I could see it being a 19-17 type of score, a defensive game. And I mean, it's going to be close regardless. Yeah, I can see that happen. I mean, who do you think is going to have a big performance for the Steelers on offense and defense?
Well, I'm pretty sure with the emphasis on the run for the Steelers, and I got to say with this close score, I'm kind of expecting this to be the game that James Conner shows up on at home for probably the first time since
He rushed over 100 against Cleveland. I think that was the last time he rushed over 100.
But I really believe that it's going to be close, and Connor's going to come up big for the Steelers.
It's going to be tough to run against that Ravens defense, even though they're going to be out with Brandon Williams for sure. Still don't know with Calais Campbell. Those are two big losses if they don't have them. But the Ravens they always defend the Steelers well when it comes to going up against the run. I think they'll have to get it done with Roethlisberger in that passing game. That's a tough secondary there for the Ravens, but they haven't been playing as well the last few weeks.
Let's now talk about the defense here. Who do you think defensively will come up big for the Steelers?
I think it has to be one of I think Stephon Tuitt. I think the defensive line, and I say Tuitt because I think he needs to have a big game going up against that Ravens rushing attack. And, this could go for the entire front seven, but they really need to shut down that run attack the Ravens have, who rushed over 200 yards in their last two meetings against the Steelers. And if you shut that run down and, make the Ravens offense one-dimensional and the Steelers get some type of lead, I mean, they should win, by at least 10 points or more if that's the case, because the Ravens are not a good team when playing from behind, and, they struggle in those type of situations.
I'm going to say the big contributors for the Steelers are guys that probably won't really amount to much on the score sheet, but because they were absent from the Steelers' victory against the Ravens, Tyson Alualu and Mike Hilton will make some plays for the Steelers, and it'll be why the Ravens are held in check compared to that historic performance. I'm going to say they get 150 yards total on the ground, and the way is led by those two guys and the rest of the Steelers defense.
Yeah, that's a good point with Alualu coming back being back for this game, and Mike Hilton also, because they were out for the first meeting, and they really struggled there for a couple of weeks without Hilton, blitzing off the edge and coming in there, because he's a big part of that defense, especially when it comes to attacking the run. He's coming full force with a head start while offensive linemen are coming out of their stance, and he's already sprinting towards the line of scrimmage. So he makes a big difference in the run game.
And Chris, any last words for our listeners before we sign off?
For all the listeners and people that have been reading our work on the site, it's been a tough year with everything going on with the COVID-19 and the pandemic, and be a release for a moment if just talking about Steelers and something that we all love, and that's the game of football and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm just thankful for all the readers and people that are listening to the podcast.
Yes, again, thank you so much. We wouldn't do this without your support. Round 2. Ravens versus Steelers. It should be a fight all the way to the finish, and the busy week continues for us on the Renegade Blitz podcast. We'll have our recap episode of Steelers versus Ravens on sometime over the weekend, and we'll also have our recap of the Steelers season so far with our special guest, Chris Carter of DK on Pittsburgh Sports, and that will drop next Monday. For Chris Ward, Guthrie Rasmussen, and Zach Napolitano, and along with the rest of our contributors for the RenegadeBlitz.com, Jimmy Sparizzi, Luke Sawhook, and Max Rosenfeld, I'm Ty Polk. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and thank you for tuning in to the Renegade Blitz. Thank you for listening to the Renegade Blitz podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Renegade Blitz, read articles on RenegadeBlitz.com, and like us on Facebook. Our podcast is available on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, and Spotify.